This video is brought to you by Once Upon a Galaxy, the collectible card battler of cosmic proportions. Available now on Steam. Stick around to the end to find out more. A few months ago, the leadership team at Unknown Worlds, the developers of the Subnautica franchise, were suddenly let go by their parent company, Krafton. Krafton had purchased the studio back in 2021 to the tune of almost $500 million, promising a $250 million bonus that would go to the leadership team, and then shared with the rest of the development team, should Unknown Worlds reach certain ambitious revenue targets before June 2026. In July, Krafton fired Charlie Cleveland, Max McGuire, and Ted Gill, citing allegations that they had completely abandoned the development of Subnautica 2 in pursuit of their own personal projects, which had led to development being behind schedule and not ready for an early access release in 2025. Krafton's internal publishing team was concerned that a botched early access release would result in the IP being irreparably damaged, using the release of Kerbal Space Program 2 as an example. Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill alleged that the game was ready for early access and that Krafton fired them to avoid having to pay out the $250 million bonus to the development team. 2 months later, Krafton has now changed the parameters of what they ousted the Unknown Worlds founders for. According to Fortis Advisors, the legal team representing Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill, the termination notices of the founders gave one reason for their termination, and that was the supposed lack of readiness of Subnautica 2 for release. Krafton reiterated that basis for its actions repeatedly. Now, Krafton is arguing that Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill abandoned their posts and deceived their employer, according to PC Gamer. This also includes accusations that the three downloaded files and kept devices with confidential information on them prior to their firing. Game Developer reported on a new filing by Krafton, which said, "The key employees were fired for cause because they covertly abandoned their posts, deceived Krafton about it, and stole confidential information on their way out the door. When Krafton discovered their ruse, Krafton asked them to do the jobs they promised they would and finish developing Subnautica 2. The key employees refused, threatening to self-publish Subnautica 2, and, anticipating their termination, stole hundreds of thousands of Unknown Worlds and Krafton confidential documents before they were fired, presumably in furtherance of their plan to unilaterally self-publish Subnautica 2 and capitalize on the earnout." This change in argument came pretty swiftly as the Unknown Worlds founders' lawsuit against Krafton entered the first phase of discovery, which is where things get really fishy. Fortis Advisors were seeking documents that would back up the reason that was originally given by Krafton for the terminations of Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill. PC Gamer reports that when pressed for those documents, Krafton said that documents relating to the readiness of Subnautica 2 for an early access launch were irrelevant to the founders' terminations. They instead said that the allegations that came after they were already terminated, that they left their posts and stole confidential material, justified their termination after the fact. I won't bore you with all the details about what documents and files Krafton claims the founders stole, but according to Game Developer, the lawsuit alleges it's everything from their emails to the development files for Subnautica. Fortis Advisors and even the judge on the case were quite confused by the sudden change in reasoning for their firing. Not to mention that Krafton isn't exactly forthcoming with providing the necessary documentation to back up their arguments, according to Fortis Advisors. The closest thing we have so far is this leaked document showing the change in scope for the early access release of Subnautica 2 over the years. But even that isn't really a smoking gun for this case, as games change in scope all the time, and the expectations for early access releases these days is to have a solid helping of polished content out of the gate. In a statement provided to media outlets following the new legal filings, Krafton said, "Krafton believes the discovery requests made by the former executives are overly broad and extend beyond what is relevant to the core issues. We have complied and will continue to comply with all of the court's rulings on discovery. We remain focused on developing Subnautica 2 and delivering the best possible experience to players." I personally find Krafton's refusal to provide documents and sudden shift in reasoning for Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill's firing to be suspect. The case was originally centered around the game not being anywhere near ready for release, according to Krafton, and suddenly, it's about the founders' handling of confidential documents and abandoning their posts instead. Confidential documents that they only allegedly downloaded because they knew they were about to be fired, and at least according to the founders, without cause. And if the game is indeed in a better state than what Krafton is arguing, then it would be hard to justify their firing unless the development team itself backs up the claims that the founders had abandoned their duties. Having been in a very similar situation myself, I wish I had downloaded my emails and files before being let go, because people within that former company ended up sending them out to be used against me later, knowing I had no way to access my own information to defend myself unless I took people to court. A costly endeavor, obviously, that not a lot of people are willing to risk. In a case as contentious as this one, I can't really blame the founders for taking their information with them as they go out the door. Otherwise, all of the power would have been left in their former employer's hands to build whatever narrative they wanted. In this case, that the leadership team stole the files to apparently self-publish Subnautica 2, which seems extremely far-fetched considering that would certainly result in a lawsuit that Krafton would immediately win, considering they own the rights to the IP. That said, I still don't know what to believe in this case. There's evidence that supports both arguments out there. The Reddit community for Subnautica did a lot of digging and found statements from Cleveland indicating he was glad to not be making games anymore, as he shifted his focus to filmmaking. This could have included a potential Subnautica film that was in development, something that the CEO of Krafton allegedly pushed Cleveland to pursue. As I noted in my first video, Krafton's track record with internal studio releases isn't great either. And Zoe has had a rough early access launch, and the Callisto Protocol had a tumultuous development. Krafton itself pointed to the failure of Kerbal Space Program 2 in their lawsuit, a game they didn't even publish, for why Subnautica 2 needed to be delayed, without providing any of the context behind why that game failed. Side note, Kerbal Space Program 2 is still somehow available to purchase on Steam, even though the game is clearly abandoned and hasn't received a single update in 15 months. As of April 2025, the developers of Subnautica 2 seemed proud of their work, and indicated they were ready to start promoting the game ahead of its early access release. At least publicly, nothing seemed to indicate internal strife within the studio or issues with the way it was being managed, from what I can tell. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the discovery phase, especially as it relates to internal studio communications at Unknown Worlds. For now, Subnautica 2 is planned for an earlier access release in 2026, and the most recent update on the game was posted on the Subnautica YouTube channel just days ago. Don't expect any resolution to this lawsuit in the near future though, as the discovery period is only just getting underway.
This video is brought to you by Once Upon a Galaxy, the collectible card battler that hooked us earlier in the year on mobile, and it's now available on Steam. From the team that helped create Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone, Galaxy is fast-paced, free-to-play and fun, which are three of the four most important Fs in the English language, and I'll let you guess what the final one is. You'll put together a crew of iconic characters from across myth, legend and fiction, like Lightning Man, King Deceiver, and Whale Obsessor, in the most satisfying team-up since the combination of Pizza Hut and Taco Bell in one building. Yum? Question mark? If you like your games easy to pick up but incredibly deep to master, then Once Upon a Galaxy is for you. So what are you waiting for? Head over to Steam or your mobile app store of choice to start putting your Once Upon a Galaxy crew together today.